Let's dive into our day 98 check-in on our zucchini baby. And there's two things I want to cover off on today. One thing's good and one thing not so good. So the good news is, take a look at this. We got a real nice zucchini growing right there. And this one is really ready to harvest. So one, we are going to harvest that baby. And then the second piece that I want to talk about, which is the not so good side, is that I've spotted a little bit of powdery mildew beginning to establish and settle in on this zucchini baby. So we're going to talk through that. But getting started with the good stuff, let's harvest this zucchini baby. And it's really straightforward. The first piece is that, as I think I mentioned in the previous video, I like to harvest on the slightly earlier side, because once we harvest, all the energy is then going into new fruit development of new zucchinis. So all that I'm going to do is grab my pruning shears. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to go whoop. There we have it. So that zucchini is beautiful. It is all ready to be thrown into some kind of dish, maybe a little stir fry this evening. So now that that is off, I can already see that there are some new little zucchini babies that are on there that will start to grow and establish and then ultimately flower and then be pollinated and turn into our next zucchinis. So that's the harvest side. Now diving into the powdery mildew side, as I mentioned there, it was on one of the leaves here, I think this one right here, that I noticed the first little spots of powdery mildew beginning to establish and settle in. This is totally common. It's going to happen to probably each and every one of us, because powdery mildew, it always comes into play as we get into the back half of summer, because it likes a really warm and humid environment. So what that means for us is that we need to try to decrease the likelihood of there being a warm and humid environment for our zucchini baby to protect it from the powdery mildew. And there's really four things that I like to do to help try and prevent powdery mildew. Three of them are proactive, and then the fourth one is reactive. So let's dive through kind of each of the proactive ones, and then we'll talk through the reactive side. The first one is all around spacing. Again, powdery mildew, it likes a warm and humid environment to be establishing. So if there is not good airflow through the plant, then there's going to be a more humid environment and a higher likelihood of powdery mildew establishing and settling in. So we want to make sure that there's enough space between this plant and other plants for air to be flowing through, for things to stay a little bit more dry. Second piece to help reduce the likelihood of humidity is that we want to be watering right at the surface of this plant. We don't want to be watering the leaves and all that, because that's going to increase the amount of humidity in there, make it easier for powdery mildew to establish and settle in. Third piece kind of straddles the line of proactive and reactive, and that is pruning. So keep in mind that I like to prune about 25% of the leaves on my plant to help promote airflow and the energy going into new growth on the plant in terms of both foliage and fruits. So that means that 25% of the plant we're going to be pruning off. If I ever spot any powdery mildew, those are the first leaves to go. I always just kind of chop them off. So this one right here, I will probably end up just pulling that one right off. If there wasn't any powdery mildew on any leaves, I would just prune, 25% of the older leaves. But as soon as we start to see any powdery mildew, let's make sure that we're doing some pruning on those leaves, getting rid of them, and taking care of that. The fourth and final thing that we can do, which is reactive, is we can spray the leaves. And so what that is 1 liter of warm water, and then 1 teaspoon of neem oil, and then 2 to 3 drops of a soap to help emulsify it, mix it all together. And then all I'm going to do once I've mixed that up is I'm just going to come to the leaf that has powdery mildew on it, and I'm going to cover that leaf, all of the top and all of the bottom. And I'm going to do that kind of pretty much every day, every 2 days, as soon as I see it starting to make any form of a little comeback. And on some days, if there's 3 leaves that have it on it, I'll spray all 3 of those. And then if 2 days later I can notice that really only 1 of the leaves still has it, then I'll spray just that 1 leaf. So if you notice any little early spores of powdery mildew that are starting to get affected there, that's when you then introduce the spray. But again, I have not had tons of success with sprays just yet, which is why I have that as a last resort for our zucchini baby and the way that we handle powdery mildew. All right, so the next and final video in this playlist is our day 115 check-in. And so in that video, we're gonna cover off on kind of what happens for the back half and the remainder of the season. But on top of that, what does a second feeding look like for our zucchinis, given that they are such big drinkers and such big eaters? And so if you're curious to understand a little bit in terms of what that looks like and what your plant's going to be looking like later on in the season, then I encourage you to head over to that video for a bit of a sneak peek. And so to do so, all that you need to do is just click on the tile right here, and that's going to take you through to the next video in this playlist. So otherwise, that's everything that I wanted to cover off on. If you do have any questions, just ask those down in the comments down below here. And then other than that, you're doing absolutely amazing, and I'll see you on that next video. See you then.